No audio because I had my mic muted. Let's take this from the top. Thank you so much for saying something, Sarah. Oh, man. How far in was I? 15 minutes. Oh, man. Okay, that's embarrassing. Whoa. Right. Yeah, it's going on a little a little discussion of history and everything there. So let's take this back from the top. Hi, I'm Matt. I'm the host on Three Skulls Tavern. I had my mic muted for 15 minutes and was working on this. Basically, I haven't looked at Pitchfork for about 3 months-ish, close to 4 months since sort of middle of October when I did my last stream. I kind of put it to one side while I was working on some other projects, and now I'm coming back to it. So this is the first one. The first thing I did was I created a copy of the previous version. Named it so that it's easy to find later in Google Documents and Google Docs, and renamed this version to version 4, which is important because I'm looking at doing some quite big changes. I've stopped working on it, but I haven't stopped thinking about this game, and I've started also devouring media in terms of books and all sorts of other stuff to try and kind of immerse myself into a specific period of world history, which is Europe in the late Middle Ages and early modern period. So roughly the years 1400 to 1700. Which it kind of ties in with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, which was a very big inspiration for getting this game started. Anyway, so the first of the big changes I wanted to make here was to come down to the section on the truths, and the truths were very specific, talking about similar things to. Hi, Brandon. Yeah, you weren't going crazy. That was me. It was yeah, embarrassing. Yeah, I'll have to see about editing this out as well. So if you're watching this on YouTube after the event and you're wondering what I'm talking about, I was recording on a live stream for 15 minutes without realizing my mic was muted. So anyway, so with the truths, the big thing here was that I wanted to strip back what I had here previously, which was basically the setting from Nord Saga, which is another game I've been working on, a Viking-inspired, not Europe, and looking at a what-if scenario. What if the Vikings hadn't been sort of halted by Wessex, by Alfred the Great? What if something had changed, and instead of kind of converting to Christianity and effectively integrating with what we consider Europe today through kind of a kind of Christian route, what if they had kept their pagan ways? They had swept through Europe with the help of, Norse mythological demi-humans, so the elves and dwarves and Jotnar from kind of Norse mythology, not at all the Tolkien kind of flavored things, and basically replaced the Holy Roman Empire with a Norse Empire. So that's a different game. I'm working on that game also, but I've parked that game for a little bit longer for various reasons. But I thought it could be kind of nice to tie these two together, because Pitchfork was kind of like a Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay spin-off. That was how it started. And it kind of, Nord Saga also kind of started from similar roots. And I kind of thought there might be a way to kind of connect these two together and have them set in the same setting but be several hundred years apart. However, that raised a number of issues, and in the end I decided, actually, I do want to keep them completely separate, these projects. Also because, in terms of systems, I want to do very, very different things with them. Nord Saga is going to be basically Forbidden Lands, like an alternate setting for Forbidden Lands, heavily modified as well, but it's going to be using the core Forbidden Lands system. Whereas Pitchfork has been built from the ground up to be something very different. It's got a lot of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay themes and feelings to it in terms of systems and things like that. And I really want to keep that, and I want to keep it separate. So, yeah, this is what I was working on when when I finally realized that I wasn't, my mic wasn't picking me up. So that's where I am. I'm basically rejigging this truth section, which is all about the setting, to not be specific to Nord Saga, but to be more specific to what I want here. And the idea is, we're still looking at Europe, but different. That was originally one of the truths in what I'd had written before. But what I'm saying is I'm not going to put a lot of detail into the setting. So I'm not going to be talking about historical things about Germany in the time of Pitchfork. I will be giving links to. In fact, I'm planning on putting a fairly hefty appendix in this with some big recommendations on books that I'm reading that are really shine a good insight into the lives of peasants during the late Middle Ages. Podcasts, movies, all sorts of stuff like that. So there will be a hefty appendix at the end if people want to kind of immerse themselves in the history of the period, but I'm not going to be sticking a massive historical sort of appendix into this game. That's not the idea. The idea is that it's assumed to be somewhere between 1400 and 1700, but players or tables, groups, whatever you want to call it, are going to be encouraged to make changes to the details of history so that it fits their table in whatever way they want. And I'm going to be encouraging things like inclusivity. If you've seen the cover art for Pitchfork, you'll already know that we've tried to put some inclusive imagery into the cover as well, to show that it's not just a game about like a historical peasant simulator in Northern Europe. So, full of white people. If you want to play that way, there's nothing stopping you, but we really want to try and encourage people to look at what peasantry was like and also to be inclusive at the same time. So anyway, that's the first one. The second one, rulers are not benevolent. That was true in the previous version. It's definitely true now. There is a caste system, if you want to call it a caste system. It's actually like a class system, I guess. And at the time, there were 3 categories of people. The top is those who fight, the middle is those who pray, and the bottom is those who work. So those who work are basically the working class, the peasants of the medieval world. And they were pretty much kept in their place at the bottom of this kind of 3-tiered society. The plague is not over. That's what I was talking about just before this. Before I realized my mic wasn't working was switched off. The idea being that this is set not during the time of the first plague. The time Black Death first swept through Europe was around the middle of the 14th century. It lasted for a few years. And then when it finished, it didn't completely go away. And for the following sort of 400, 500 years or more, I think that there are elements of the plague that still crop up today or in places around the world, although it is treatable. The idea is that there are localized, smaller outbreaks of the plague. And that's really good for GMs in terms of a plot device or a plot hook that you can bring into play, is that maybe there are rumors of an outbreak of the plague, or maybe it's actually happening in the village that the players are playing in. So the plague, the Black Death, is definitely an element of the setting which needs to be listed as a truth. Creatures of myth exist. I want this to kind of feel like a sort of mythological take on the setting. So we're not looking at it with modern eyes. We're looking at it through the eyes of peasants in that time. And they might believe in things like ghosts and all the mythological fairy tale sort of creatures that peasants believed in back then. And the idea is that they actually do exist, or they can exist. And I haven't quite deleted the rest of it, but the idea being that this is kind of like, if you've ever heard of the game, Spanish game set in the Iberian Peninsula in the Middle Ages. Chaosium have the rights to it now. Aquilare. That's a very similar game. That is set in sort of Middle Ages Spain, or the Spanish Peninsula, and it has this whole assumption that, or the whole thing is built on supernatural creatures exist, and there's this kind of moving scale of faith and the supernatural, I guess, like not the Christians, like the Christian supernatural, because it's very much like Christian Spain, but more like devils and demons and vampires or whatever the supernatural happens to be. And as like you might believe more one way or the other, etc. It's a big part of the setting, a big part of the game, and I quite like that. I've played a little bit of Aquilare, and it's an element I really like about it, is having this sort of mythic take on a historical period of time. Mithras does that as well with all their kind of mythic games too. But yeah, basically that's something I want to encourage here. Obviously, I'm putting in here as a truth. It could be completely ignored, and you could have very much, you could have games of Pitchfork that don't involve any kind of pretend creatures. But I think it's a nice element to explore, because superstition was extremely rife back then, and having those things actually have some truth to them is, I think, quite exciting. Also, I recently watched The Witch, which is a really excellent film. It's not set in Europe, it's set in North America. It's set in, I think, New England, I believe. And it's great. That kind of, I think, helped me to think, like, okay, yeah, sure. That movie was very much based on historical accounts. I believe, in fact, it said at the end of the film, all of the dialogue in the film was based on actual written records at the time. So, very much based in people's superstition, and kind of looking at it. Well, this is superstition. We would look at it with our eyes today and think, that's absolutely ridiculous. But in reality, people back then, people really believed it. And what if that was true? So that's the kind of what if take on this setting as well that I want to be exploring. Is those things could be true. Magic is forbidden. Now, magic isn't going to be a thing in this game. Is it? I actually have. Let me get this book out. I bought this book recently. I haven't started reading it. The Occult, Witchcraft and Magic, an Illustrated History. And it talks about magic going back to, antiquity, right through to the modern day. And I haven't started looking at it, but I do want to go through it. And it might be that if I use any kind of magic in this game, it's going to be based on historical records of what magic was like. So basically, again, touching into superstitions and beliefs around how magic would work, and expanding on that a little bit. But the main thing I would be wanting to put in here with truths is, if there is magic, it's not that it's forbidden, it's outside of the reach. I'm trying to think of a kind of snappy way to write this, but it's not available to peasants. Or if it is, it would be forbidden to them. So maybe you've got hedgewises or witches or something like that, where they are tapping into some sort of magical energy, but they're absolutely not allowed to do that. So if they get found out, they would be, burnt at the stake, or things that happened sort of a few hundred years after where I want to set this. So we'll say magic. Magic is unavailable. Not sure that's quite right the way to say this. Magic is not. Maybe we'll say magic exists, but is out of reach. The secrets of magic, TBC, are not allowed, are not shared or permitted with those who work. The gods are unreliable. That's very, very much to do with the theology of Lord Saga. Doesn't really apply here. If I want to put something about God, it's this Europe, but different. Religion is as it is, as it was historically. So we're looking at a kind of Christian society. Yeah. That'll do it, I think, for now. I might add some more stuff to this later. But again, what I'm doing here, sorry, I kind of didn't mention this when I was starting off. Because it's been so long since I looked at the Pitchfork, I want to look at this with a fresh pair of eyes. As I said, I've been thinking about it a lot, and I want to try and change some elements based on some things that I've been thinking about and some directions I want to go with it. So this is a big part of it here. I'm keeping this bit about inclusivity, so I'm gonna just quickly move that in. Setting dials. Insert break. Delete there. There we go. Yes, these are dials where you can kind of change stuff. I'm not sure what I'm going to do here. I guess I kind of like technology. Nah. Let me put this here in the truths. One of the truths is that technology is. Oh, you know what? I'll keep it as a setting dial because that kind of makes sense. You can kind of base it around. Do you want it to be more like the early modern period? So there's like things like gunpowder and stuff like that. Fluid period. Taking cues from the 14th through the early 18th centuries. Do I want to go as far as the 18th centuries? I don't think so. I think maybe the 17th, late 1600s maybe might be the furthest one to go. Someone's spelling there. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. Basically thinking about it like Warhammer, sorry, a little bit. None of that is applicable anymore. So, this is going to be a big TBC. I might not even do setting dials. I'm just going to leave it. Maybe put a little section here that says, like, make it your own. After inclusivity. Oops. Is heading 2. Is it heading 2? I'm just going to copy and cut this out. Yeah, that's not worded too well. I'm going into the weeds here a little bit. Village creation, I don't want to. I kind of want to come back to this. I've got some ideas to change this and use a deck of cards instead of potentially doing tables for everything. Hi, Dorego. Yeah. So I'm gonna skip past the village creation because there's gonna be maybe some slight tweaks to it, but or I might even be overhauling it completely. But that's something I can do at a later stage. It's not something I really want to seriously remove or change or anything like that. I'm just gonna skip through the rest of this here. Attributes, trauma, skills, reputation. Reputation, I've actually added this in after I had a chat with some... I had an epiphany about this. I'll talk about it now because I'll be doing a future YouTube video, a future dev diary about reputation, going into some detail with it. The idea here is that it was inspired by Pendragon, basically. Pendragon has these traits. I think they're called personality traits or something like that. And there's like 20 of them. And yeah, the idea is that they inform elements of your personality, and they're all based on two extreme opposites. So you might have bravery and cowardice as one pair, right? And you are tracked on this, on each of these, basically each of these 20 or however many there are, these pairs. And you know, if you're extremely brave, then your like slider is going to be over towards the brave bit. If you're extremely cowardly, it's going to be over on the other side. And if you're kind of a mix of both, or you don't really know yet when you start the game, you kind of start in the middle position. And it's a really cool mechanic. It's been around for decades. This is by Greg Stafford, who's a tabletop role-playing genius. And it occurred to me that one of the things about village life, one of the things that's going to drive a lot of the kind of interactions you're going to have as a player character with other characters in the game, is going to be how the rest of the village perceives you. So your reputation is going to be a pretty bloody big part of your character. It should be a big part of your character. And at the moment, I didn't really have anything in there for that. I was thinking about bonds. Bonds was already in here, which I've got here, which is kind of an existing Year Zero engine thing. But reputation is very different, and I want to bring this in. I want to base it on what's done in Pendragon. And the idea I've got here is to use... I think I've currently got 4, maybe 5 pairs of things. And those are, as I've said already, we've got bravery. And I'm actually... I've written these down on my phone. Let me pull them up very quickly. Where were they? Sketchbook. That's where I did it. Although I have changed my mind on a few of these too. So, I've got... I'll talk about this, what this means a little bit when I'm finished writing these down. We've got brave and craven. We've got honest. And we've got shifty. We've got diligent and lazy. And we've got careful and rash. And I think I'm actually going to be removing this last one. And then there was... I'll have to look on... I had a long conversation on one of my Discord servers about this with some people. I think on the Three Skulls Tavern one or the Three Skulls Publishing one. Yeah. I'm just going to put it in because I think it's... Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. I've got brave and craven. I've got honest and shifty. I've got generous and greedy. Got diligent and lazy. And I've got cautious and rash. cautious and not careful. Well, I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's just semantics. And there's 5 of them there. So this is probably how I'm going to be starting it off. Now, this doesn't mean this is who you are. This is the big thing that I think is going to be hard to get across as an idea. This is your reputation. This is how people perceive you in the game. So let's say that you're having an interaction with somebody, right? You're trying to charm somebody. You're trying to convince somebody about something, and your reputation in the village is that you're not a very honest person. Maybe you've been caught out for lying in the past or something like that, right? You have a reputation for being dishonest. So while you're trying to convince them of this thing that you're trying to tell them, regardless of whether it's true or not, you're going to have a penalty to your roll because they think that you're shifty, because that's you've got that reputation. And the way this is going to be is this is going to be basically on a 3-tiered scale. So you're going to have, we're going to be like brave, and it's going to go 3, 2, 1, then neutral, and then it's going to go 1, 2, 3, craven, right? So I'm actually just going to copy and stick that in for each of these. So the idea being, I've got a couple ways I can go with this, right? So the idea is you can either, if there's going to be a life path system, which I would like to do for this game, and if I can kind of already starting to build it in, as there are formative events that happen in your life, formative events give you basically bits about your character. Now I absolutely want them to also move your reputation along one of these sliders in some way or form. So things that happen in the past that are all related to the village are going to give you a bit of a reputation for something. Yeah. And the idea here is that if you have some of these negative, these vices, if you think of them like virtues and vices, if you have a reputation for any of the kind of negative things, the things on the right, then you're going to be quite keen, theoretically, to, like, the way you act, the way that you act in character is potentially going to be trying to move that dial over into to the left, to the good ways. Let's say people think you're shifty. You're going to be trying everything you can to convince people that you're honest, and that means maybe you're not lying at all anymore. You kind of like have this motivation to always tell the truth because you don't want people to think of you as being a kind of a liar, and you want them to start, changing how they think of you. So I think there's a lot of real role-playing gold in having something like this, in that you're not telling you're not telling a player how to act, how their personality for their PC needs to be. You're just telling them how externally how people perceive them. And then it's up to them to decide whether they care enough about that or not to make it a part of their of how they play their character. And I quite like that as an idea. It's something I definitely want to at least be pursuing with the kind of playtesting that's going to be happening hopefully soon. So yeah, that's a big thing. And I want to have this quite central on the character sheet as well. I want these dials to be kind of like right in the middle, or very, very obvious, very big, because this game is a big part of this game is going to be about social interactions, and this is going to become a massive element of that. Yeah, and the idea basically being that you'll get either a bonus or a penalty in certain circumstances based on this reputation and how it comes into effect. So if we think about how some of these come into play, mechanically, I think some of them are pretty obvious when it comes to typical social interactions. So if you think about, trying to deceive somebody, trying to charm somebody, trying to haggle with somebody, honest and shifty are going to be very big ones. Generous and greedy, when would that come into play? If you have a reputation for being greedy, for example, that's gonna have an impact maybe on your haggling. If you're haggling with somebody and people think you're greedy, then you're gonna have a harder time of kind of getting people to give you a good price on things, because they think you're trying to cheat them constantly, right? Diligent and lazy. again, this is just it seems like there's very, I can think very specific social interactions that are quite related to kind of a peasant's life where this would come into play. Yeah. So for example, if something, if people are kind of trying to decide on what to do and trying to decide on who's going to do something within the village to sort out some problem that's happening, and you're perceived as being lazy, then they're going to pass you by, or they're going to treat you very differently than if they think that you're quite diligent, that you're quite hardworking. Yeah, cautious and rash. I don't see that. I see this one as being quite difficult to. I'm going to leave it in for now, but I might actually. I'm going to put some brackets around it actually, just so I can remind myself later that I'm not so keen on this one. By the way, there are dozens of these pairs that could come into play, but I really wanted to focus specifically on ones that are reputation based, so that external, what people think of you, and also ones that can be playable in several different scenarios. So not things that are kind of very specialized or very internal as well. So like piety, how pious you are. That is potentially one, but I don't know whether it's going to make it into the first playtest or not. So it's possible it's just going to be these four here, right? Brave and Craven, I kind of skipped that one. That could be if you're trying to convince people to help you fight some monster that's kind of lurking around in the dark and picking people off or something like that. If people think that you're brave, you're probably going to be able to convince them. You're going to, like, if you're trying to command them to do the sort of leadership role, you get a bonus for that. If they think that you're cowardly, you might get a negative, and they might suspect that you're too afraid to do it yourself, and you're trying to get them to do it for you. In which case they will be like, no, absolutely not. Like, I'm not going to help you, or maybe there's some sort of price that's paid. Like, they'll only help if you're, in the front. Cool. So that's reputation. I don't have too much more to say about it, I don't think. I'm just going to put these in a kind of bullet there. Bonds I don't want to change. Problem. Yeah, so there might be some sort of problem that you have. I actually want everybody to have a problem. Excuse me. And I'm going to have to look at a bunch of this other stuff too. So, personal traits I've played around with quite a bit. So the first one is this distinctive feature I really like. This is from Woofrup originally. I came up with this. I spent a lot of time in the previous stream, coming up with these on air. Doomings are another interesting thing. There were soothsayers in the Middle Ages who did go around and kind of predict people's dooms, basically. It's a huge element of, or it's a big part of the character building process in Woofrup. It adds a lot of flavor to a character, even if you never ever end up using it. It's a fun little thing to do at character creation, and I really wanted to include it in here too. So I've added dooming in, but I didn't want to come up with a big list of doomings that were kind of like they do in Woofrup, which are massive tables, or often massive tables, where they have an actual sentence laid out, like what the dooming is. And I wanted it to be a bit more tarot based, because a dooming is it's a soothsayer type of thing. You can think about it being a kind of this sort of mystical, prediction of what's going to happen in your character's life. So I thought actually using either a tarot deck or a deck of playing cards could be a really interesting way to do your dooming. And the idea here is that you draw 2 cards, and you consult the tables below. I'll have some tables here. And you kind of, it says, choose one to represent your personal problem. Oh, yeah. I've kind of copied this copy and paste error. So whether it's going to be drawing 2 cards or it's only going to be drawing 1 card, we'll say we'll draw 1 card. Consult the tables below. So the idea here I was thinking about was looking at the tarot, and there are 4 suits in the tarot for the minor arcana: cups, pentacles, swords, and wands. They have slightly different names depending on who you talk to, but that's kind of from the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot. And they have these sort of meanings. I've kind of played around with the meanings a little bit to make it specific to Pitchfork, but the idea is if you draw a card which has a heart or a cup, it has to do with, it has to, like, I've made this really about problems rather than doomings. I did want to keep this as problems, actually. Oh man, I've really been mixing this up. I came in here, I had this idea about using playing cards for dooming. And somewhere along the line, I also thought it would make a really good idea to do it for your problem as well. And I put in the thing for the problem. So, yeah. Well, I'm not going to be doing too long of a stream tonight because I'm pretty knackered. So, here we go. Draw a card from a standard deck of playing. To determine your dooming, draw a card, draw a playing card, and consult the dooming table. To determine your problem, draw a card from a standard deck of playing or tarot cards. I'll need to write this all in. But the idea here is I want to do a playing card oracle, right? So the nature of your problem is going to be something to do with your family, something to do with something financial, something to do with authority, or something physical. And this is where I kind of need to be careful about thinking about balance and stuff, is that people can come up with a physical problem. They might be creating characters who might only have one arm, or things that could have quite a big mechanical impact on their character in theory. But I've said here that this is for role-playing purposes only, should have no mechanical effect on your PC. So that's a little caveat I've added in there, but people can do whatever they want, really. The issue is thinking about the value. There's like 13 themes to go along with this. So how do I tie the the kind of the nature of the problem to very specific themes that work across all 4 of those? So something that works with both, a family-based problem or a physical-based problem. And it could be something like, it could be things like addiction, or so like financial addiction could mean that you're in debt because you're addicted to something. That could be your problem. A physical addiction would be that your problem is that you are physically addicted to something, and it's kind of like taking a physical toll on you. Authority addiction could be that it's illegal. The thing that you're addicted to is completely illegal, and so there's like, if you're caught with it, you face being severely reprimanded, maybe hung even, or something like that. And family addiction could be that there's maybe someone in your family is addicted to something. So that's kind of the idea. I'm going to have to go through these. I'm going to have to come up with some ideas for themes of problems that are going to work across all 4. And yeah, I think it's kind of an interesting way to look at problems where you can draw 2 cards. You can kind of look at one, look at the other one, look at what they mean, and go with one that you think feels like, oh yeah, I like this one. This is a good problem for my character. Yeah, so that's a new thing I've put in. One thing I took out, so if you've looked at previous versions of this, I had motivations in here. I took motivations out. In fact, I'm gonna bring up an old version of Pitchfork. So if I go to version history, And we'll look at the January one, I think. 'Cause I think that still had all that stuff in. Yeah. So personal traits, distinctive features, I've already done that. Here I had motivations, and I hadn't put anything in here yet, so it was completely empty. But I wanted to have some sort of motivation. So you roll a dice, and you have a random motivation. And the motivations were going to be one-word things like greed or revenge or something like that. But I think the reputation thing is going to bring natural motivations into player characters anyway. So there's no need to have this kind of artificial one where you're trying to think about like, okay, I rolled this for motivation, or I'm just going to look at the list and pick one. It didn't make as much sense to me when I've got what I think is a much more elegant way of handling things. Then I looked at flaws, and the flaws are basically the problems. And again, I felt like I could do D66, but there's so many D66 tables when you're creating a character. Roll the dice, roll the dice, roll the dice, look at it, look up the table. I love playing cards. I love using playing cards for character creation. I don't think it's done enough. I just got a beautiful deck of tarot cards as well. I'm going to actually show them. I think these only got published, 2017, so they're actually pretty new. They're called the Borderless edition of the Smithwaite Tarot deck. And I already had a kind of pocket edition of the tarot deck, which I'm going to show as well. And really, they're okay, but they're just tiny, and they look like this, right? So, kind of like that. Yeah. And then you compare them to these ones, and these ones are big. I mean, they're amazing. They look like this. And it has the exact same art, but instead of being tiny with a white border all around it, which is how they originally did, they've taken the border away, and they've basically made it borderless. And they're just amazing. They're really, really nice. They're a nice size. They have a kind of cool little back on them as well. And yeah. Anyway, so that kind of influenced this as well. Like after I got these tarot cards, I was looking at them and thinking about like, how can tarot be used a bit more in a game and in gaming. And I know there are a lot of people using the tarot in the kind of indie scene. I've been thinking about, it depends on funding and how I'm going to fund more artwork for this game. I've already spoken with the artist, Harry Bottas, who's doing the art for the game, about whether he's interested in doing a tarot deck specific for Pitchfork. So doing however many, I don't know if it's going to be a full tarot deck, whether it's just going to be a minor arcana, whether it's going to be including the major arcana as well. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, by the way, don't worry about it. But it's basically, there are like 70 odd cards in a tarot deck. And yeah, we'll see. Can't get it back in the box. That's annoying. Anyway. So yeah, I think that I wanted to look at. Let me go back now. I really wanted to look at how to use how to use a tarot deck in character creation, and dooming makes a lot of sense. Dooming is a very Warhammery thing. It happened a lot back then as well. There were traveling soothsayers who would kind of predict your future, predict your, how your life would end. And yeah, it's really great. So I think drawing a card for that is a kind of a cool way to handle that. And having the problem be based on an oracle as well, I think is also nice, because problems often in the Year Zero engine games that exist, the problems are, you're encouraged to come up with your own, but it sometimes can be quite hard to do that. And the ones that are given are often quite specific, and they're fine, they work and everything. But I really like the idea of using oracles a bit more. I'm a big fan of Ironsworn, which has some amazing oracles in it. And it just makes a lot of sense to me to try and bring some of these elements in wherever I can. So hence what I've got here. There's a potential here for a bonus is to do the Major Arcana. The Major Arcana and the, what are they called? The have to look it up. So you don't have the 3 face cards in the tarot. You actually have a 4th. You got the king and the queen, and you have a knight and a page. A knight and a page. So we'll say pages. It's kind of like the jack, I guess, is kind of like a knight. So the ace through jack, knight, queen, king. Yeah, and that way there's maybe we'll have to think about this. How I'm gonna do that. I think I would just put here 14 values. Ace through page, jack, knight, queen, king. Extra would be the major arcana. And the major arcana would be very specific. So, like, if you drew death, you know, what would that mean exactly? Your problem is related to death. You wouldn't. There's no suit on it, so you know it's just a major arcana card. And maybe the nature of this is you take the major arcana out for this specific, for the problem deck. But if you've like already got a deck of tarot cards that you've shuffled, then that's going to be an absolute pain in the arse. So I'll have to think about this a little bit. And it'll take some playtesting to figure out too. Put extra the major arcana. And the nice thing having the entire tarot as an option there means that you can just use a normal deck of cards, and some of those extra things just won't apply because, you know, they're extra bits. The playing cards system will still work just fine. Right. Bonds. Bonds I want to spend a little bit of time on, again, in a future video. Again, it's a really important part of village life, is having a kind of a bond to somebody else. Yeah, I read a really, I didn't read anything. There's a book that I'm kind of interested in reading eventually, which is about relationships in the Middle Ages, and specifically looking at friendships, and just reading a little bit about the blurb from it, and then going on a bit of a Google search and reading some kind of academic essays that people had written about online. It's a very interesting concept that has really changed in the modern day, and that is a bond of friendship is a very, very strong thing, or was a very strong thing back then. That if you said that you were someone's friend, it had pretty serious connotations for you to say like what that meant. Like you would stand by that person, you would come to their defense if needed. Yeah, there was just a lot going into it, and I think that's an important part of life back then, and it should be an important part of Pitchfork as well, especially as the focus is on a village, on a set place, a set location that you're not expected to kind of go adventuring and leave like you would in D&D or any kind of traditional fantasy game. So bonds are really important. I'm probably going to come back and put a lot more effort into this later, but just something to say. I think what I've got here is a very light touch at the moment. It's the typical Year Zero engine sort of thing, and it's only really meant to be used for the GM to use as a kind of plot hooky type of thing. In the other Year Zero engine games, actually, it is used for experience points, but I'm not doing experience points in this game, so it's, again, I need to change it up a little bit. So, then we come to the big thing. Yeah. Effect dice. I'm not sure I added that in. I do want to use an effect die. So, this is a Year Zero engine game. You're going to roll a single big pool of dice, but one of those dice is always going to be a different colored dice. So if you're rolling 4d6, yeah, you have 4d6, so you might be using blue dice like this, but you also have your special effect die. And that might be a white die, like this one. So this would be your pool of 4 dice. And that white dice is going to be used for quite a few things. Now, this is something I've talked about in previous videos about adding or using, and I've kind of gone back and forth on it. And it's something I've thought a lot more about, and I think I want to stick it in and slowly expand on how it's used and where it's used. I've also been thinking about potentially using an effect die, but upgrading it from a D6 to something like a, I don't know, a D8, maybe a D12. Makes the game a little bit less accessible because then people need to have access to polyhedral dice, and that's one of the great strengths of the Year Zero engine, is that anybody can play it if they just have normal D6s lying around, especially games like Tales from the Loop or Coriolis, where there's only one pool of dice. You can mix and match anything you want for that. But people don't necessarily have a D8, or a lot of people don't have a D8 or a D12 lying around. So yeah, that's kind of something I'm thinking about. So adding an effect die in is another thing I want to do. I've got Doom in here, which is interesting. So I've taken darkness points from Coriolis. I think I'm going to keep it in here. It was very, very much... No, I'm going to keep it in. This is going to be problematic now, looking at my... looking at how I've written down the... where is it? The reputation stuff. Oh, reputation is not in here anymore. That's interesting. Where did I put it at the top? Need to add reputation in there somewhere. So we've got, I'm going to add it as a step here. Alright. So don't forget about it. Cool. Right. Reputation, as I've laid it out, is something that goes to like 1, 2, and 3 in terms of potential negative modifiers to your roll. Now, I've gone with the sort of Vazen or Tales from the Loop method of doing difficulty, and that's not taking dice out of the pool, but increasing the number of successes required to get to succeed, right? So if I only have here the number of successes being 1, 2, and 3, and you always need at least 1 to succeed at something. But you potentially have, so let's say you have a 1 in lazy, right? That means, and there's something comes up where it comes into play that being lazy is a thing. You'd expect the difficulty to go up by 1. So that means it would go from 1 success to requiring 2 successes. Let's say you've got a 2 in lazy. Maybe that means 3 successes are required. And then if you have a 3 in lazy, that means 4 successes are required. Now, I don't really want to get into that level of... I don't want there to be 4 successes required because of that reputation thing. Maybe I should just look at it with... if you're at 1 on lazy or 1 on brave, or whatever, like the positive one, lazy or diligent, sorry. Positive, it's easier. If you have a 1 in any of the positive ones, you're going to get an extra dice added to your pool. Maybe it's, and this is what I need to think about. Is it going to be when I do reputation that likewise going on the opposite end is going to, that specific mechanic is going to take dice out of the pool? Rather than increasing the number of successes required? That's something I have to think about. Yeah. So, then we get to, I'm going to just kind of scroll down here to, we talk about trauma, which is a big important part of this game, and then we talk about conflict. And I've talked about having different lenses. We have simple conflict, climactic scenes. Climactic scenes are straight out of Year Zero Mini. And then we have a full combat type of thing. And for this, I've really taken a page out of Mutant Year Zero for how I want this to be handled. But since writing Year Zero Mini, I'm kind of leaning towards, rather than having all this information in here, just following how Year Zero Mini does it. And again, I've got this saved now, and I think for the first time I playtest, I'm going to use effectively as a basis what I've done in Year Zero Mini. And that is basically narrative combat. So the idea being, if you need initiative, you can use whatever form you want, but I recommend a very doing what I've done here, which is rolling against a trait to see who goes first, whether you go before your enemies in any round. But yeah, anyway, we'll come back to that. So I think that's probably where I want to end it here. Oracles, I haven't really done anything with that. Gameplay advice, appendices. I'm going to put in here for Appendix D, further reading. And I'm going to specifically call out here. So we're going to talk about films. We'll talk about books. We'll start with books, actually. No, we'll do books last. There's going to be a massive list of books, and I think that they're not as accessible for a lot of people as other forms of media. Historical. Oh, do I want to call it a bibliography? It's again not books. Further historical research. Oh my god. I have to think of something better to call this. Films, books, blogs, podcasts. That'll do. Yeah. Blogs or blog posts, I guess. Whoa, hello. Yeah, happy Valentine's Day. Thank you, Google, for reminding me. Cool. So I'm going to go right back to the top and go to the to-do list. I've talked about a lot of stuff here. There's some things I want to do. So, this is something I'm not sure about yet. I'll talk about that in a second. So let me just get the other bits in here. Highlighted sections, obviously. Quicker village creation. I want to scrub village creation. Use cards. Okay, so for this one we're going to say replace full combat with Year Zero Mini method. Conflict method. That including chases. Make community a much bigger focus for advancement. That's a good one. Expand relationships into a deeper bond mechanic, which I've done. Expand social roles and include the community in them. So again, I think I've done that with reputation. So the idea here is I want the mechanics that are there, the mechanics that are on the character sheet, to really reinforce the themes I'm looking for in this game. The theme is about living as a peasant in the Middle Ages. So yeah, I think it's definitely what I'm quite excited about. So we're going to go here with format. We're going to strike through. Expand Doom to make it more dynamic. Yep. Location cards. Oh yeah, that's something I wanted to do. So, The thing I have been flip-flopping on this game from the very beginning about is attributes and skills. And attributes or skills. So the idea being, the other big game I've worked on is Year Zero Mini. Year Zero Mini has 4 attributes and no skills. Your career, or your concept as it's called in that game, determines whether you get any bonuses to your role. So kind of like career is skill, sort of. Well, it's kind of upbringing, background. Your concept is like your background and your occupation, basically. So there's something in your background or in your occupation that can help you with a role, then you get a bonus. There is, therefore, as is always the case in games that have career as skill, some negotiation with the GM whenever you want to try and apply one of them to a role. However, I have playtested Year Zero Mini a lot, and I don't feel like that's a big negative, in my opinion. I know some people really hate it, and that's fine. But it's something I kind of am leaning towards here. However, there's another thing. I'm actually going to be playing the first edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay in 2 weeks for Mud and Blood Patreon supporters. And there's something about Warhammer First Edition, Wolfrip First Edition, that I really like. And it's this kind of weird big list of like 100+ skills that it has. Every skill is like a mini rule. It's crunchy as hell, but at the same time it kind of covers so many different things. And the idea is that skills in that game are binary. You either have it or you don't. And you can kind of look at, they fall kind of what I consider into 3 categories. The first one is general, like what you would consider a skill. The second one, or you kind of call them abilities maybe. The second one are combat related skills. And the third one are like permanent buffs. So some of them, the permanent buffs could be something like Savvy, which gives you a permanent bonus to your intellect or your intelligence or whatever it's called in that game. I can't remember exactly. So if you have that skill, then it basically means, yeah, you're a bit cleverer than you would have otherwise have been. So you get a bit of a bonus to that stat, to that characteristic. The combat ones are things like Strike to Stun, Strike Mighty Blow, and they have very specific rules for how they apply, and they're kind of hard to separate from those rules because they're very combat specific. Then everything else, and this is the vast majority of other skills, could just be used as sort of tags and just say like, okay, I have the skill ventriloquy, right? Ventriloquy just means I've been trained or I have some experience in how to do ventriloquy. So if I need to pretend that somebody else is talking, I can throw my voice, I can make a puppet talk without making my lips move, whatever. Yeah, I have that skill. So anytime you're trying to do something related to ventriloquy, theoretically you could just say, instead of reading the specific rules that are listed for that, they're like 1 or 2 to 4 paragraphs of text in the book, you could just say, here's a flat bonus because you have the skill. And that's one thing I was thinking about here with Warhammer First Edition inspiration is how can I make the game, how can I make Pitchfork maybe feel a bit more like Warhammer? But I'm not sure that's a great approach. And I'm going to delete it. So I'm just going to say Wolfrip inspiration. There might be some other stuff coming in here. Right. However, I do want to think, I have been thinking a lot about this attribute plus skill. I currently have attributes and I have skills. And the reason for that is this game started with just, skills, and it was a big list of skills, like 30 to 40, I think. Maybe even more. And the good thing about that is you can really differentiate characters and careers by kind of focusing on some skills more than others. The downside is that you tend to lose the kind of overarching view of the kind of raw characteristics of a character. And in the end, I ended up putting attributes back in and having attributes plus skills. But the more I've thought about it, I've never really been super happy with that. And I'm getting to the point where I need to stop changing this all the time. Every time I look at this, or every time I park it and think about it and come back, I seem to have a different idea about what I want here. So it kind of is pretty clear to me that I haven't settled on something, and I really need to think about this properly and come up with something that I'm happy with, and I don't want to keep changing every time I come to this game. I'm not sure what that answer is yet, but at the moment I'm leaning towards skills. The original thing I went with Pitchfork. Stripping attributes out completely, and having a big list of skills. And I already have a big list of skills, so theoretically, I might just need to add a couple of in to cover some of the attributes that are gone. But if you look here at my attributes, where are they? Oh, they're at the top. Sorry. We've got physique, agility, dexterity, logic, cunning, and fellowship. And the idea is that they are always tied. You always roll an attribute, the most relevant attribute, with the most relevant skill, which is standard Year Zero engine, basically. But if I have the very specific skills to go with a lot of these things, then arguably you don't need to have these overarching things anyway. There's also issues of, if you have a weapon-based skill, and, which attribute to use it with. If you have, like, a sword skill, is it physique? Is it agility? Is it dexterity? Is it more of a mental thing? You look at archery. What's archery? Archery is arguably a mix of strength and coordination, which is kind of, eye-to-hand coordination. And a very, very big part of that is your kind of, is I guess logic, and thinking about things like wind direction and all the stuff that you've learned with it, aiming up and down. And if you remove attributes from the equation and you just have an archery skill, that's you basically saying, this is how good I am in archery, and all the things that go in with being good at archery. And you don't really need to think about all the rest of it. And it's a nice little elegant way of handling things, and that's kind of where I'm leaning back towards going to. The other definitely factor in thinking about this is if I do make a big change, I'll have to change my careers and how I've got them statted up. For example, here's a bunch here. Herbalist. I've got occupational surnames. In fact, let me go one that I've finished completely. So if I go up a little bit higher here to boater, for example. You've got occupational surnames as an option, an attribute, 4 key skills, and then the trappings. Now, if I take the attribute out of here, I don't have to change it. If I take attributes out completely, I just have to delete that line from the careers. Nothing else needs to change. They're already well differentiated by the skills I've already identified. And I think I have identified a very, very good list of skills, so I don't even think I need to change that necessarily, or hardly at all. So if I would, now here's the list of skills here. So I think I've got 24. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so 8 per column, 3 columns. Now there are some combat-based ones. We've got archery, we've got ballistics, we've got fighting, weaponry. And I think that's it. So 4 weapon-based ones. Yeah. That's slinging as well. 5. So 5 out of 24. So that means there's 19 other skills. Now that's a fairly big list. I feel like it handles quite a lot, and I don't think I really need to add too much more to it than that. Certainly when I was coming up with all the when I was coming up with all the careers, I've got a big list of careers here too. How many? I think 18 in total. Yeah. I got 18 careers, which are all, I put a lot of thought into these ones as well. I've come up with bigger lists in the past. I'm pretty happy with these 18. And they are all ready to go. I've spent a lot of time looking at skill lists and mapping the skills to them so they all are well spread. they all make sense, and even changing some of the careers that are on offer to make sure that they're kind of feels like there's a good spread of skills on offer. So I really, really, really do not want to change this if I can, because that's a lot of work, and I'm very happy with where I've landed with it. So basically what I'm saying is the easiest way to change this and to only have one set of stats is to strip attributes out and go with skills only. This is also easy for me to think about because on my Mud and Blood podcast, I've just reviewed and talked to the creator of Warlock, which is a game that is based on Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. It has a big list of adventuring skills, which basically is kind of like what I'm talking about doing here. There are no attributes in that game. So, yeah, I kind of feel like this is the way to go. The only thing I might have to rename a few skills potentially, because I think like Force is one, which I might want to change. Force is in there. Nope. So something to do with like how using might is in it. That's fine. So I'll have to go through and just have a look at them and see like sleight of hand's already in there. I can see. Yeah. It might be fine. I'm hoping it's fine. Yeah, so that's potentially a big change I'm going to be making to this, is having those that list of skills and no attributes. So to-do list, remove attributes. And I'll show you another thing, another reason why this makes a bit more sense to me. This is the Pitchfork character sheet in Google Sheets. This is my prototype from version 0.3. If I was to get rid of like one thing I'm looking at here is that the vitality and the stability are kind of like attributes. They're used like attributes, but they're not connected to a skill, and that feels a little bit weird. It's like a different way, a different mechanic to every other mechanic in the game. And you look at it, but it's also considered kind of like an attribute. It's near the attributes, and it's like why are vitality and stability similar to attribute plus skill, but they're only rolled up into one? Now, if I remove attributes and I've just got skills, you could have skills that are up to 6 and 7 as well. You could have a skill of, I don't know, animal handling, if you're some sort of like animal-based person, and that skill level could be 6 or 7 or whatever it happens to be. And then you've got this nice little everything kind of works together a little bit more consistently, and consistency is really important for a game, because the more inconsistent it is, the more things people have to, there's more exceptions, people have to remember them, etc. So, yeah. And it's also different to Year Zero Mini, which I think is kind of an interesting way of looking at this. I kind of don't want to just create a Year Zero Mini clone. I want to actually do something a little bit different, and that's not a deciding factor in why I would necessarily go this route, but it is a nice benefit to choosing this. So yeah, the more I've just talked about it now, I think the more set I am on doing it. So I have already put it in here, and I think now I'm saying I think I'm going to end up doing this, and I'm kind of giving myself a little bit of wiggle room here because I know how I am, and by the time I come to my next live stream, I may have changed my mind on what I want to do. But I really want to start playtesting this game, which means I need to start putting some flags down, drawing some lines in the sand, and saying, this is what the game's about, these are the core mechanics, and not really changing up anything else after that, and really just sticking with that. So I'm nearly there. I mean, there is a little bit of work to be done around reputation, expanding bonds. There's quite a lot in here, really, with the things I want to expand on. But in terms of playtesting, some of the core things like how does the skill system work? How does the trauma system work? These are all things that I could start playtesting now. And not now, but yeah, now I guess I could. In fact, people have playtested Pitchfork in the past, so there's no reason why I can't do it myself. So maybe we'll be looking at a playtest, an online playtest of Pitchfork in the near future. I'm going to stop there because I can feel my throat starting to go. It's been an hour and a half, albeit 15 minutes at the beginning where the sound wasn't working. So whoever is still online watching, thank you for sticking with me. Yeah, and if you're watching this in the future and have any questions, pop them in the comments. And otherwise, I think that's me. So I'm going to skedaddle now. Thank you very much again. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit the subscribe and like button, as that helps me to grow the channel. And that's it. Thanks very much, and catch you next time.